Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Ahmad Munawar. He is the CMO at Boutique Growth. Ahmad, how are you doing today?
James, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm stoked to chat with you today, Ahmad. We're going to be talking about the 5 Ps of lead generation. But before we do that, can you explain to our listeners a little bit about Boutique Growth and what you and your team are up to over there?
Yeah, so Boutique Growth is a marketing, coaching, and advisory firm. And what we do, James, is we help B2B professional services and consulting firms build actionable marketing plans so they can generate more leads and close more business. What we believe, James, is that most B2B service businesses are leaving a ton of money on the table. You know, if you're good at what you do, you have a strong team and a roster of happy clients who are getting value from you, then you're probably underselling yourself and under-marketing yourself. And what we do is we help you close the gap between the results you're currently getting and the results you should be getting.
Got it. I love it. So Ahmad, we've got a lot of content that we're going to be going over today. And so to dive right in, these 5 Ps of lead generation, is there anything that you'd like to communicate to our listeners before we dive into this first P?
Yeah, so the context of this framework, James, is that one of the things that we often forget as B2B marketers is that although we're selling to businesses, we're really selling to the human beings that run those businesses.
Yeah.
And so quite often we get caught up in this trap of communicating what I call the 3 Fs, right? The features, the facts, and the figures.
Yeah.
And we make these very elaborate, rational arguments to buyers. The problem is that when we do that, we're ignoring one of the fundamental truths about how people make buying decisions, which is that they buy on emotion and justify with logic. So what I've done here with the 5 Ps of lead generation is I've created this framework that'll help you engage the buyer, meet them where they're at, get their attention, and then nurture them down the path of wanting to have a conversation with you.
I love it. I love it. So this first P, we are talking about profile. So talk to us about what is profile and what's its impact on lead generation.
So, you know, the old saying is that if you're talking to everybody, then you're effectively talking to nobody. And that was always true, James, but especially now, right? With the amount of messages that buyers are exposed to these days, and I don't even know what the numbers are, and that's partially because they keep going up, but it's becoming harder and harder to get your message through, you know, between emails, commercials, Facebook, phone messages. And the thing is, it's not just advertising messages either, right? It's messages from my wife and from your friend and WhatsApp and this and that, right? You're competing in this jungle of messages. So if you don't have a really crystal clear profile, rather, of who you're talking to, not only will it be hard to craft messages that'll get their attention, but they won't be able to self-identify that the message is for them. And that's really the first line of defense, right? When a buyer receives a message, the first thing that they're asking themselves, and this is subconscious, right? It's happening without them even knowing it's happening, is they're asking themselves, is this for me?
Yeah.
And if it's not for them, or if it's not entirely clear, then you know what? They've got more important things to do, and they're going to go ahead and ignore it.
Yeah. So I've actually got Adele Ravella's book sitting on my desk right now, Buyer Personas. It sounds like, you know, this P of the equation really comes down to having that buyer persona nailed down. What do you see the biggest issue with the clients you're working with? Do they have to say, you know, if you're serving everyone, you're effectively serving no one? Do they just not have a buyer personas defined, or they have them defined, they just have so many of them that there's no way any organization could feasibly go after every single one?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. Most people would agree that you need to have a buyer persona at some level. Like, that's not a hard argument to make. But once you go through and do the hard work of crafting those personas, then creating messaging for them is another problem altogether. And what I find is that organizations and marketers will try to craft messages that speak to all of their buyer personas. Right? So they may have 3 or 4 or 5, and they'll say, okay, let's send out an email or do a blog post or a video, and let's try to hit all of our personas. Well, it doesn't quite work that way, right? If you're going to do the hard work of creating personas, you might as well do the hard work of crafting messages that speak to each and every persona individually.
No, that makes perfect sense. So the second P that we're going to talk about, Ahmad, is problem. It's relatively obvious where you're going to go here, but I think your insight here is going to be really valuable. So talk to us about problem.
So look, as marketers, it's very natural for us to be in love with the product or the service or the solution that we sell, right? And if you're not in love with what you're selling, then you've got bigger problems than what we're going to cover here.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we often forget that buyers are not in love with us or our companies or our problems or our solutions. The truth is, buyers don't really care about your solution until they're convinced of three things. First is that they have a problem.
Yep.
Second is that they have a problem that's worth solving. And third is that your solution is a good fit for their problem. So once you've gotten past that first question from the previous P, which is this for me? The next question going through the buyer's mind is, hey, so do I need to pay attention to this? Right? Okay, I get the message is for me, but is it important enough for me to pay attention to? And that's a loaded question because there are all kinds of things that they should be paying attention to. Truth is, there's not enough time in the day to pay attention to everything. So the buyer has to make some very tough decisions. And how often do you see, James, companies who are solving a very legitimate problem for their customer, but they just can't get the customer to make a decision? Why is that? It's because they're not solving a problem that's important enough, right? It's not enough to solve a problem. The problem's got to be important enough to get the buyer's attention and make them want to do something about it.
Yeah. And so do you think is the lesson for marketers here to spend more time being able to articulate what that problem is that they solve?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to get past the feature level, right? So maybe you make this problem go away, or you add this feature to their solution, or you mitigate this risk, whatever it may be. You've got to dial that down and really get to the why, but not just the why for the organization. And this goes back to the importance of profile. What about the why for the individual? Right? Your individual buyer inside the organization. And it may be a few people if you're taking an ABM approach, right? But for each individual, what does it mean for them? If they bring you in, if they do a deal, how does their life change? How does their job become easier? How does their prospects, their career prospects change?
Okay. This third P that we're going to talk about, Ahmad, is promise. Talk to us about this one.
So look, this part should be easy, right? If you've done everything right up until now, you've got a really clear profile. You've crafted a big, bold problem, or targeted rather a big, bold problem. The next step should be easy. It's about really crafting a promise that's ultimately the inverse of the problem.
Okay.
Right? And there's three things you got to do here to nail down the promise. The first is that, like the problem, the promise should be big enough, right? Small promises don't get attention, right? If I'm scrolling through my inbox or I'm scrolling through LinkedIn and I see a small promise, then I'm going to just go right by it. It's got to be a big, bold promise.
Yeah.
The second thing is your promise has to be believable, right? We all have very low BS thresholds, right? So if you make these big, wild promises, like you're going to solve every problem that they can think of, and it's going to be amazing. The air is going to smell fresher, food will taste better, and so on. Then my BS rater goes off, and you've lost me already, right? The third is that the promise should be provable, and this kind of gets into the next point. But from a positioning perspective, you need to make sure that you can actually prove that your promise is legitimate and that you can follow through.
So that leading into this fourth P, which is proof. So expand on that for us.
So proof, right? Now that you've got their attention, right? You're targeting a clear profile. You've communicated what the problem is that they're facing. They're convinced that it's a big enough problem, and you've made a promise to make it go away. Now the burden of proof is on you, right? Now, the thing is, you can't just claim to be able to do something. You can't claim to be able to make a problem go away. Claims fall on deaf ears because anybody can make claims, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be able to prove that you can deliver the goods. Now, most people understand this, right? They understand that they need to, at some level, demonstrate that they can make good on their company's core competency or their ability or their expertise. But what they do is they rely on the sales process to do this for them. Right? So when a prospect engages with their company, then the salesperson or whoever it is that's doing the selling, they're the ones who make good on the promise and prove their expertise and their ability through case studies, whatever it may be, right? The problem is, as you and I both know, James, the average B2B buyer is almost 60% through the decision-making process before they engage a vendor, right? That's the data coming out of CEB and Google, right? So, it's not good enough for your salesperson or the sales process to prove that you can do what you claim to do. You've got to prove that before they engage with you through, really good, informative, educational content. And I know of a neat little show called the Content Marketing Show that'll help you do just that.
Love it. So this fourth one is proof. This is the last one we're going to talk about, Ahmad, is push. Talk to us about this one.
So look, if you've done everything right up until now, then you should have a growing number of leads who are following you, who are interested in you, and who are consuming your content. But the thing is, if you stop here, then you'll have a lot of followers and a lot of friends, but probably not very many clients. And look, this is a classic mistake that people make. The goal here is not to make new friends, it's to make new customers. And this is really where your marketing strategy needs to tie into your sales strategy. So whatever your sales process might look like, you need to build a bridge here from everything we've been talking about so far into the sales process and into the sales conversation. Okay. Now, that's easier said than done because left to their own devices, most buyers will opt for the status quo every time, right? They'll prefer to do nothing. Yeah. They'll read your content, they'll check your website, they'll follow you on Twitter, and they're perfectly content leaving the relationship right then and there. But you've got to really make a strong case as to why they should engage you and take the next step. And there's 3 keys to doing that, James. The first is whatever offer you make to help them get to the next level has to have a ton of value. Yeah. You got to provide value in that interaction, whatever that interaction looks like, whether it's a sales call or a consultation, strategy session, webinar, there's got to be a compelling amount of value. The second is there has to be urgency, right? They need to know why they need to act on it now. Again, status quo reigns supreme, right? Left to their own devices, they'll do absolutely nothing. So why is it urgent for them to take action right now? And the third key here is scarcity, right? You may have an incredible offer, but you know what? I'll come back to it tomorrow. Or I'll come back to it next week. I'm sure it'll be there, right? You want to instill in their minds the doubt that, you know what, maybe it'll go away. Maybe it won't be here. I better act right now.
Are there any clients or any stories or use cases of brands that have done this really well?
I mean, a really effective tactic that I find in my space, James, and I work with the B2B professional services and consulting firms, is to have a limited number of kind of free strategy sessions or free coaching calls that you offer on a regular basis. So if you get a growing number of leads at the top of the funnel and they're following you, they're interested in you, they're going to want the opportunity to engage with you. Most people keep those sessions unlimited, right? So anybody that reaches out, they're willing to pick up the phone or go in and meet with them, right? Yeah. The problem is that dilutes the offering, right? If you put a set number on it, you make it really, really scarce and you say, look, I'm only going to do 10 of these sessions this month and here they are. If you want one, get one now. Then that can be a very effective tactic.
I love that idea. That's got me thinking about how we could even do that in our own business. That's fantastic. Ahmad, this 5 Ps have been incredibly helpful. Is there anything else around these ideas that you'd want to share before I let you go today?
So I think the question that I get a lot is, how do I use this, right? The way you use this is you think of this as kind of like the 5 strings on a guitar. Right? Okay. It's not that you play all 5 strings. If you just jam away at the guitar, then you're not making music, you're making noise, right? Yeah. You got to know which chord to play. So when you plan out your lead generation campaigns or your marketing campaigns, you document what your approach is in each of these 5 Ps. And then when you craft a communication, whether it's a blog post or an email or a video or whatever it may be, you got to be very strategic about which chord you're going to play and when.
Okay. And so, Ahmad, if there's somebody listening, maybe they want to dig deeper on this, they want to pick your brain on some of this stuff, what's the best way for them to connect with you or connect with Boutique Growth?
Yeah, so I've got an entire video crash course that walks through each of the 5 Ps. I've got one video on each of the 5 Ps, and you can get free access to that crash course at 5leadgen.com. And you can spell out 5 or use the number. Either one works. That's 5leadgen.com. And if you're somebody that's in the B2B professional services and consulting space, then you can check out my company, boutiquegrowth.com, and see if we can help you with that.
I love it. Awesome, Ahmad. Well, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, James. My pleasure.
If you've been getting value from this podcast, you can help us reach more people by reviewing the show on iTunes. Here's how you can leave a review in less than a minute. Open your podcast app and tap the search icon in the bottom right corner. Type in B2B Growth, then select our show. Once you're there, tap the Reviews tab and tell us what you think of the show. These reviews help us out a ton.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.